When a liberal TV host tried to ambush Nayib Bukele live on air, she had no idea it would be the biggest mistake of her career. When a liberal TV host attempted to ambush Nayib Bukele with questions about his marriage live on air, she had no idea she was about to make the biggest mistake of her career. But before we delve into the story, leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from. It was prime time on a major television network with millions of people watching live. The anchor was famous for her trap moments with conservative figures, and that night she thought she had the perfect ambush. Her team had spent weeks preparing questions designed to humiliate Bukele and attack his family values, but he had no idea what was about to happen. When the cameras started rolling, Bukele calmly sat back in his chair, while the anchorwoman wore that rehearsed smile, the same one used by media elites when they think they are about to destroy someone's reputation. 3, 2, 1. What happened next would not only destroy the anchorwoman's career, but also show El Salvador and the world what it means to stand up for real values. It all started with what seemed like an innocent question. Mr. Bukele, you've built a safer nation, transformed politics, and inspired millions. Would you say it's all been a matter of luck? He said it with his perfectly studied smile, the one that makes you wonder what's really behind it. But Bukele had seen this kind of game before. Start softly and then try to sink the dagger. He leaned forward slightly, his expression one of confidence and amusement. It's interesting that you asked that question, Bukele replied in a firm, controlled voice. The press loves to talk about luck. It's their way of minimizing success, of suggesting that hard work and sacrifice don't matter. But let me tell you something about luck. Luck doesn't reduce crime, it doesn't improve the economy, and it definitely doesn't restore hope to a country. You could see in the anchorwoman's eyes that this was not the defensive response she had hoped for, but she persisted, her smile tightening just a bit. So you're saying that everything you've accomplished is due solely to your efforts? I am saying, Bukele replied in a more intense voice, that success comes to those who work for it. Yes, I have been blessed, but I have also worked harder than most can imagine. I have spent sleepless nights, faced crises that seemed impossible, and made decisions that others would have avoided. But there's something even more important. I've never done it alone. The presenter's eyebrows arched slightly. There it was, the opportunity she thought she'd been waiting for. But she had no idea that she was about to expose more to herself than to her interviewee. Not alone? She asked with a tone of mock curiosity. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the people behind Nayib Bukele. Of course, when you mention the people behind me, Bukele continued, you probably think of my team, my advisors, but let me tell you who really deserves the credit. My family, especially Gabriela. The presenter's face changed barely perceptibly, like a predator who thinks he has found a weakness. She thought she had found her angle. Ah, yes, Gabriela. You know, a lot of people wonder about her role in all this. Some say she's too discreet to be the wife of such an influential leader. Bukele's eyes narrowed slightly, and the air in the studio grew thick with tension. Discreet? No. Dignified. There is a big difference, although I understand why some in the media might have difficulty grasping that concept. A nervous murmur ran through the audience. The presenter stirred in her chair, clearly not expecting that response. But she pressed on, now with a supposedly concerned tone that fooled no one. What I mean is that we rarely hear her speak in public, unlike other wives of leaders who are very visible. Don't you think the people deserve to know more about the woman behind Nayib Bukele? The people, Bukele replied with pride and unwavering firmness, know exactly what they need to know about Gabriela. She is bright, prepared, and chooses her moments to speak carefully, unlike some who feel the need to fill every silence with noise. The audience murmured in approval. The presenter's rehearsed smile faltered for a moment as she realized her usual tactics weren't working. But instead of backing down, she decided to push harder. Let's talk about those achievements, she said, her tone changing to something more aggressive. Because some say, well, they wonder if her greatest accomplishment isn't simply being Nayib Bukele's wife. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Bukele's expression hardened, and even the cameramen exchanged glances. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments on television. I'm going to be very clear about something, Bukele said, leaning forward slightly. Since you want to talk about achievements, let's talk with facts. Gabriela is a psychologist, has led educational and cultural initiatives that have changed lives, and has represented El Salvador with more grace and dignity than many public figures the press idolize. But of course, you don't know about that, do you? Because the traditional media are too busy pushing their own narrative. The presenter, sensing she was losing control of the conversation, tried a new approach. Of course, Mr. Bukele, But don't you think that being married to you has opened certain doors for you? Bukele let out a dry laugh without a hint of humor. You know what's interesting about that question? It reflects exactly what's wrong with the way some people think. Success is not about getting doors opened for you. It's about what you do once you walk into the room. And Gabriela, she doesn't just walk through doors, she transforms every space she enters. The audience burst into spontaneous applause. The presenter's face flushed slightly as she realized her narrative was falling apart. But with a tone of desperation, she tried one last effort. Surely you will admit that your position, your influence, your power, all of that affects the way people perceive you. Bukele's response was immediate and sharp. You mean how people like you see her? Because let me tell you something about influence and power. They don't create character, they reveal it. And what Gabriela has demonstrated in the face of every challenge, every attack, every unfair criticism is exactly why I'm proud to have her by my side. By this point, the presenter's smile had completely disappeared, but she was about to make her biggest mistake. Well, since you mentioned being by her side, she said, her tone growing bolder, let's talk about that. Your lifestyle, Mr. Bukele, the constant spotlight, the pressure, the scrutiny, don't you think it's difficult for someone who didn't seek this kind of exposure? You know what's really hard? Retorted Bukele, his voice charged with controlled intensity. To see how the media twists every story to fit their narrative. Gabriela not only adapted to this life, she has thrived in it, despite the constant attacks from those who claim to defend women's empowerment. The presenter leaned forward, believing she had found a vulnerability. But the pressure must be enormous. The constant travel, the public appearances, the expectations. Some would say it's almost like a gilded cage. Bukele's eyebrows arched slightly. A gilded cage. Interesting choice of words. Tell me something. Why is it that the media celebrates strong, independent women unless they are conservative? Then suddenly they must be trapped or caged. The audience murmured in agreement. The presenter's composure cracked a bit as she realized that her attempt at manipulation had failed again. I'm just suggesting, the presenter tried to recover, that maybe this isn't the life she envisioned for herself, being constantly in her shadow. My shadow? Interrupted Bukele, his voice mixing amusement and indignation. I think you're confusing shadows with spotlights. Gabriela doesn't walk in anyone's shadow, she shines with her own light. But of course, you wouldn't understand that, would you? Because the kind of journalism you practice is not about truth, it's about creating shadows where there are none. The studio fell unnaturally silent. The anchorwoman's producer was talking frantically into his earpiece, but it was too late. She had chosen her path and was about to cross a line that would make television history, though not in the way she had hoped. Her next question left everyone in shock. Mr. Bukele, she said, abandoning any pretense of professionalism, let's be direct. You are a powerful, influential, resourceful man. You could be with any woman you want, yet you are still with someone who, he paused, looking for drama, who grows old by your side. Haven't you ever thought of looking for something better? The silence that fell over the studio was deafening. Several audience members let out an audible gasp. Bukele remained completely motionless, his expression indecipherable for a long moment. Looking for something better? He finally repeated, his voice dangerously calm. Let me tell you something about true value, since that seems to be the only thing you understand. In business, yes, sometimes you look for a better deal, a newer model, a shinier option. But we're not talking about real estate or cars. We're talking about my wife, my partner, the mother of my daughter. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the presenter. And let me explain what true value is. True courage is someone who stands by your side when the cameras are off. It's someone who tells you the truth when everyone else is just saying what you want to hear. True courage is loyalty, integrity, and character, things that apparently are no longer taught in journalism schools. The anchorwoman's face paled. He opened his mouth to speak, but Bukele wasn't finished. You know what's really fascinating? He continued, his voice gaining strength. You're here asking me if I've thought to look for something better, while demonstrating exactly why your audience is dwindling. Because you don't understand what real value means. You don't understand real relationships. And you certainly don't understand what real respect is. The audience erupted in scattered applause. But the worst was yet to come for the presenter. Her attempt to recover would only dig her own hole deeper. I didn't mean to imply, the presenter stammered. Bukele interrupted her with a sharp tone. Oh, but you did. You said exactly what you meant. And that's the problem with the media today. They make these insinuations, they throw these disguised questions, and then try to retract them when someone confronts them. But let me explain something about real relationships. The presenter visibly stirred in her chair as Bukele continued, her voice now echoing not only in the studio but in every household watching the broadcast. Gabriela and I have built something that most people only dream of, a real partnership, a real alliance. Not the kind that shows up in your gossip columns, not the kind you try to discredit with your mean-spirited questions. We have faced challenges together, celebrated victories together, built a life together. He paused, letting his words sink in. The studio was completely silent now, each person hanging on his next sentence. And you're here suggesting I should look for something better. Let me tell you what that really means. You're suggesting that I should abandon loyalty for vanity, that I should trade substance for superficiality, that I should trade true love for a younger model. That's not only an insult to Gabriela, it's an insult to every woman who is watching this show. It's an insult to every person who believes in real relationships. The host-producer was desperately motioning to go to commercial, but Bukele was in full response, and everyone knew that interrupting him now would only make things worse. You want to know why I'm still with Gabriela? Asked Bukele, his voice firm and clear. Because she is irreplaceable, not just because of her looks, although she is beautiful inside and out, but because of who she is. Her strength, her grace, her intelligence, her heart. These are not things one trades for something better. They are things you value and treasure. The audience began nodding in agreement, some even discreetly wiping away tears. But Bukele wasn't done yet. He was about to deliver the final blow that would turn this interview into a legendary moment. And let me tell you something else, he continued, his voice now charged with authority, filling the studio. The very fact that you asked that question demonstrates everything that's wrong with the way the media views relationships today. They think everything is disposable. Marriages, commitments, values, all reduced to mere commodities that can be traded in their marketplace of sensationalism. He gestured toward the cameras, toward the audience, toward the whole stage. They invite people to programs like this, pretending they want meaningful conversations. But what they're really looking for is controversy, drama, that viral moment. Well, congratulations, you just got it. The host's fake smile had completely disappeared. She now had the expression of someone watching her career crumble in real time. Mr. Bukele, I think you're misunderstanding, she tried to interrupt. No, I'm interpreting exactly what you said, he replied firmly. And now let me tell you what everyone back home is thinking. They're thinking about their own relationships, their own marriages, the years they've invested in building something real with someone they love. And they're outraged by your suggestion that all that history, all that loyalty, all that love should be thrown away. Why for something newer? The audience erupted in applause, but Bukele raised his hand to silence them. He wasn't finished. You know what makes El Salvador great? He asked, leaning back slightly, completely in control of the situation. It's not just our success, it's our value, family, the loyalty, the commitment, the understanding that real relationships aren't about what's convenient or what looks good on magazine covers. It's about sticking together through thick and thin. He settled back in his chair with the absolute confidence of someone who had mastered the conversation. So no, I've never thought about looking for something better, because there is no better than Gabriela. There is no improvement when someone has been by your side in every battle, when they've helped you become a better person, when they've been your pillar in every storm. The presenter was now frantically shuffling her cards, seeking to regain control of the interview, but it was too late. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. And let me tell you something else, Bukele added, preparing for the final blow that would make television history. The real story here is not about me or Gabriela. He paused, his voice now with the tone of someone who was not just answering an attack but teaching a lesson. It's about you, about what you represent in today's media. He pointed to the anchorwoman's cards. You came here with your prepared questions, with your little traps, thinking you were going to expose something. But the only thing you've exposed is yourself. You just showed everyone watching exactly what's wrong with today's media. The producer gestured frantically into the anchorwoman's earpiece, but she remained frozen, unable to regain control of the situation. Because, you know, Bukele continued, you thought you were going to humiliate me by suggesting that I might leave my wife for someone younger. Instead, you humiliated yourself by demonstrating that you don't understand the slightest thing about real relationships, real commitment, or real journalism. The studio audience began to shift restlessly in their seats, many nodding in agreement, some even standing up. Let me tell you what real journalism would look like. It would focus on Gabriela's social work, on her initiatives as First Lady, on her impact on thousands of Salvadoran families. But of course, that wouldn't give you your viral moment, would it? That wouldn't fit your narrative. Bukele leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. You know what really bothers people about the media? It's not just the bias, because that's obvious to everyone. It's the fact that they've abandoned real journalism in favor of cheap attacks and cheating moments. They've traded substance for sensationalism. The anchorwoman tried to interrupt. Mr. Bukele, we are just trying to ask the questions that our audience... No, Bukele cut him off firmly. You are trying to manufacture a controversy where there is none. You're trying to imply that a man in my position would naturally want to leave his wife for someone younger because that fits your superficial worldview. But let me tell you something. Real men, real leaders honor their commitments. They honor their vows. They value the meaning of a true partnership. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, drowning out any attempt by the presenter to regain control. But Bukele wasn't finished. And here is the truth about true alliances, he continued, now with a calm assurance in his voice. They get stronger over time. Every challenge you face together, every victory you share, every storm you overcome, it all builds something that your shallow way of thinking can never understand. The presenter, desperate to salvage this situation, made one last attempt. Mr. Bukele, we just want to have an honest conversation about... Bukele let out a brief laugh. Honest? You want honesty? Well, let's be honest. You came here hoping to humiliate me, suggesting that my marriage is just a matter of appearance or convenience. Instead, you've shown everyone watching exactly why people don't trust the media anymore. He gestured toward the audience, toward the cameras. Look around you. Every person here knows exactly what you were trying to do. And every person watching from home knows it too. They see through these tactics. They understand what relationships really mean. The anchorwoman's face had turned an alarming red. Her producer was frantically motioning to go to commercial, but Bukele held up his hand. No, let's end this, because there's something else everyone needs to hear. The studio went completely silent. Even the cameramen leaned forward slightly, knowing they were witnessing a moment that would be remembered for years to come. The reason your question about looking for something better bothers people so much, Bukele said, his voice combining authority and genuine emotion, is not just because it's disrespectful to Gabriela. It's because it's disrespectful to every couple that has grown old together, to every relationship that has weathered the storms of life, to every marriage built on something deeper than what you see on the covers of Hollywood magazines. He paused, looking directly into the camera. There are millions of Salvadorans watching this right now. People who have been married for 20, 30, 40 years or more. They've built their lives together. They've raised families together. And you sit there implying that all of that should be thrown away. Why? Because of a younger face? The presenter tried to speak, but her voice had lost all the confidence it had at the start. Bukele continued without missing a beat. This is not just about defending my marriage. This is about defending every marriage based on real love, real commitment, and genuine value. Because that is what makes El Salvador great. Not the superficial values you're trying to promote, but the deep and lasting bonds that hold families and communities together. The audience erupted in sustained applause. Several people stood up. The presenter's producer had given up trying to salvage the situation. He knew this moment would forever go down in television history, but Bukele was not done yet. His last words would become the most quoted part of this now legendary interview. Let me leave you with one final thought, he said, sitting up slightly in his chair. To every person watching this, to every man and woman who has stood by their partner through thick and thin, who has chosen loyalty over convenience, who has built a real life with a real partner, you are the ones who make El Salvador great. Not the media elite with their twisted values, not the celebrity circle with their disposable relationships. He turned to the presenter, who seemed to have physically shrunk back in her chair. And to you, I hope this teaches you something about real journalism, real relationships, and genuine respect. Because right now, El Salvador is not only watching how I defend my wife, it's watching how you expose everything that's wrong with the media today. The audience rose in a standing ovation. The anchor's producer finally managed to cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Within hours, clips of the interview would go viral. Social media would explode with support for Bukele's defense of marriage and family values. Even his critics would have to admit that this was a master class in how to turn a hostile interview around. If you like this story, be sure to like and subscribe. And remember, real relationships aren't about looking for something better. They're about sticking together. Leave us a comment sharing your thoughts on this.